conflicting. And that might be, for example, because something's been updated, but a sufficiency plan is still online and has got some old information in it. So I can't guarantee that everything I'm going to share today is going to be 100% accurate. But what would be really helpful is if there's anyone out there to email me afterwards. My email address is on the end of the presentation. And if you can let me know where you think there may be an error or maybe an amendment, and that would be helpful, because what I can then do is I can go back and look at where I got that information from, and then try and work out if there's anything out in the public domain which potentially needs to be changed, which is giving mixed messages. So that's the first point. The second point is that this is going to reflect just a snapshot of commissioning arrangements as at the 1st of February. There is one local authority, I'll explain this, where I've jumped the gun a bit and I've put information about something they're just about to do. But apart from that one, it should reflect what is happening now. There are ongoing changes to arrangements throughout the year, and they can happen quite frequently. So just having that and sort of being aware of that, of using this information for any other purposes, because I do find myself updating this on a very regular basis. So if you leave it a few weeks or a couple of months, it might well be out of date. I'm going to show you the understanding of arrangements in Wales, arrangements in Scotland. And then in England, the picture gets a bit more complicated because local authorities in England, some of them are members for more than one framework. So I've shown what I believe, or what we believe to be the primary arrangements. So the framework or the DPS that the local authority will go to initially, and then those local authorities that might have a secondary arrangement to go to. Then we'll just talk a bit about the current commissioning supported by the ADS groups that don't have any procurement at the moment. And then I'll just show you what we think is going to be the possible and planned procurement that may be happening in 2021. So the first thing I'm going to go through is the arrangements in Wales. So we have 22 local authorities in Wales. In Wales, they all use the same foster care framework, which is managed by Rhonda Cynnon-Taff. I'm really sorry for those of you Welsh speakers. I probably pronounced that completely wrong. So it's all one framework, and they're tendering for this one at the moment, and they're just about to go into a revised framework where they've split it into geographical lots. So you can see we have the north and the east side, the West Wales and the south and east. The only difference really is Powys is a local authority that's on 2 lots because of its strange long shape. So it sort of is in the north lot, but it'll also fit into the western side as well. So those are arrangements in Wales. They've been running for quite a number of years now with one framework. It's called the All Wales Fostering Framework. And as I said, they're about to go into they're currently re-tendering at the moment. Our arrangements in Scotland, so they have Scotland XL, which is an arrangement which all local authorities have signed up to use in Scotland. But we do have three sort of other frameworks in Scotland, which are our Green, which is our Glasgow, Falkirk, which is our Yellow, and the City of Edinburgh as well. So they will go to their own frameworks first before they will then go on to the Scotland XL framework. So that just sort of shows that in both Wales and in Scotland, the arrangements are pretty straightforward. When we come across to our arrangements in England, they become a little bit more complicated. So at the moment, we have 31 different primary commissioning arrangements across England. So the screen, just to let you know, where you see the dark brown, so those are local authorities that have their own, either their own DPS, their own framework, their own select list, or they don't have any formal arrangements in place and have chosen to spot purchase. So I want to, just so that you're aware, that's not all one, they're not all members of the same framework. The dark brown are all individual. Up in the north, we have the light brown, which is the Northeast 7 arrangements, We have the Tees Valley, where there's 5 local authorities working together there. But amongst the, between those two, the NE7 and the Tees Valley, those form 12 local authorities that are coming together to establish, they're just about to launch some new monitoring arrangements, which will cover both of those frameworks. Cumbria, North Yorkshire and Lancashire have their own individual arrangements. And then the lime green is the White Rose, which is our Yorkshire area. Over on the west, we have the purple, which is the Northwest Fostering Placements. So it's a framework which actually covers all Northwest local authorities, and the Cumbria, Lancashire and the Liverpool are also members of that Northwest framework. But again, as I said before, I'm referring here to the primary arrangements. So Lancashire and Cumbria will go to their own frameworks before they go to the Northwest framework. And the light yellow on the side here is our Liverpool City region. So that's the Wirral, Sefton, Liverpool, Halton, St Helens. And they've come together to, they've recently put that contract in place. In the centre here, we have what we call D2N2. I call them the Star Wars, just because they remind me of R2-D2. So they're the D2N2, and they have a framework in place for those 4 local authorities. Now, sometimes I might say frameworks, so I think this one is a DPS, bear with me. And again, over on the eastern side, you'll see there's local authorities that will be doing things quite individually. The West Midlands have a framework. They've also been running quite a sort of a solid consortia arrangement for a number of years now. They've got their framework, I think they're midway through their 4-year framework in the West Midlands. And then as we travel south, we have BB, so that's Central Bedfordshire, Bedford and Luton. Bear with me a second. And we have, so those 3 local authorities work together. They're surrounded by some local authorities that don't have a framework as such, but are members of CRAG. So we'll use the CRAG database as their primary source of finding placements. The dark yellow is the South Central. So South Central is actually project managed, or that contract managed, I meant contract managed by the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. And they they're all members of one consortia. Hampshire, which sits in the middle, declined the opportunity to be part of that consortia and have got their own arrangement in place, which does break that arrangement up, as you can see. West Sussex and East Sussex have their own frameworks. Brighton and Hove, which is the little one down the centre here, Brighton and Hove is a member of both frameworks. I think they will rely on the West Sussex framework more than the East Sussex, which is why I've depicted them in grey there. I could be wrong there, and I don't know if that changes. We'll come on to London in the next slide. Over on the southwest, we have the Southwest Local Authority. Southwest, even though it's called the Southwest, this is a Southwest framework. The rest of the Southwest is split into the Peninsula and Cornwall. Just there's a little bit that can cause confusion at times. So we have the Southwest Local Authorities here, and then we have the Peninsula Local Authorities. I'll just move my screen up so you can see this. The Peninsula Local Authorities, which are 4 local authorities, as we've got Torbay and Plymouth down here, and then Cornwall have opted to do their own thing and have their own framework in place. So we'll now move on to the London. I can just scroll out now. Sorry about this. Okay, so our London local authorities. So the yellow is the Commissioning Alliance. And just so you know, apologies that we've got Hertfordshire, Surrey, Kent. We've got some of the local authorities around the London area, which I wasn't able to work out how to get rid of those. So apologies if there's a distracting you. But in terms of the London local authorities, the yellow, they will use the Commissioning Alliance framework, or so DPS, to go to initially. The local authorities in pink are the local authorities that will use London Care Services, London Care Placements, to use that as their first port of call. The orange local authorities will use the South London Commissioning Partnership and go to that DPS as their first port of call. Newham, this is the one I'm afraid that I had a little bit of an error with. So Newham at the moment are going to London Care Services, but they are just about to tender for their own contract and to not be part of a consortia, but to do their own thing. So that gives you an example of what the primary arrangements are across England for where local authorities they go to for when they're looking for placements in the independent sector. As I said before, some of the local authorities are members of more than one formal arrangement, and I've shown that on a map here, which is the secondary arrangements. So up in the northeast, our Tees Valley and North East 7 local authorities, they have got an arrangement that if they can't find placements on their current frameworks, they will refer to the CRAG database to try and find some placements. Over in the northwest, if you remember, I said there were local authorities that had their own arrangements, or there was the Liverpool City region. If they can't find placements on those, they will go to the Northwest Fostering FPS Fostering Placements. Bear with me. Right, as we go down, quite a number of local authorities you see will have the CRAG database as their secondary arrangements to go to, and that's a bit of a random sort of arrangement and patchy arrangement across the country. I'm also very aware that some of these arrangements are going to be changing as at the sort of 1st of April. So CRAG is a membership where local authorities will sign up to use that, and their list of members does change sort of on an annual basis. They will have members join them and have members leaving them. And there's also some secondary arrangements in London. So a number of local authorities that if they can't find a placement on their Commissioning Alliance framework, or they can't find a placement through the South London partnership, may then go to use London Care Services. Some of them will use the CRAG database, and some of them are actually named on the South London Commissioning Programmes DPS, which they will use that as a secondary, will be their second choice. So as you can see, it's quite a sort of a complicated picture across England. Just to make a last point here, is that there are a very small, I could find about 3 or 4 local authorities that had a formal tertiary arrangement. So they'd signed up to be a member of a 3rd DPS or a 3rd framework. But at this level, level 2 and level 3, most local authorities are spot purchasing using a sort of a range of arrangements. That might be that they have their own local authority informal list. They may have they may access lists which are provided by other consortia and colleagues. They might access external sites, just such as LinkMaker or Charms, if they've got pre-arrangements to use those sites. Google searches, specialist knowledge, so there may be organisations like the National Deaf CAM service, which may have specific information about placement services for children who are deaf, as an example. Provider information that's been provided, networking, and word of mouth. So, Harvey, is this a good place for me to stop and see if we have got any comments from colleagues at this point?
Yeah, just on CRAG, Marie, Becky Politi was just reminding us that as such, it's not a procurement or a commissioning arrangement. It has another purpose to it.
Yes, you're right, actually. Sorry, I should have clarified that. Thanks, yeah. Becky. Yeah, so CRAG doesn't have as Harvey says, it's not a procurement arrangement. It doesn't have a overarching contract terms and conditions. CRAG is very much a commissioning arrangement and supports with monitoring. Okay, were there any other ones at this point?
Becky just made one more point. She's talking about drilling down and understanding why Wales and Scotland are able to work together in larger numbers than local authorities in England. That is an interesting point. I'm not sure they do actually, given the number of local authorities. You think about the number of authorities in White Rose or Placements Northwest. That's not a dissimilar amount of authorities to Scotland and Wales that kind of hang together in that sense. But I don't know, have you got a view on that, about the sort of greater commitment to the national arrangement in Wales and Scotland?
And I think that the sort of follow-up question for that is there evidence that there's been benefit of that? I'm being, being a little bit of a sort of a devil's advocate here, because we'd need to look at has there been better value for money? Has there been better outcomes? Has there been better stability? But yes, I think that there have been in some ways more efficiencies in working together. People know what the contract actually covers. So in England, with 31 different arrangements, if you're a provider that does cover all 31 of national provider that does cover all 31 arrangements, you've got people in the back office that have to know the terms and conditions, different specifications, and all the contracts vary. Whereas, I mean, it's common sense, there's going to be huge efficiencies in all the local authorities and the providers in Wales knowing that they work into one set of terms and conditions. And I think that they can then use those to do things differently at a more local level. But it's a good question, I think.
Yeah, I think Bridget's just made a point about Scotland. Bridget, the national contract in Scotland run by Scotland Excel, the local authorities choose to follow it. So they don't, although they set up the template for the national contract and admit providers onto it, a bit like London councils do, the local authorities still have the individual contracts. And also in Scotland, Glasgow aren't part of the national contract. That's still correct, Marie, isn't it?
Yeah, but because of the COVID and the changes in procurement, I think they did change that to say that this year they could access that if they needed to. But I think they're about to go through a procurement this year. But
that was a major, I guess, downside of the national contract in Scotland, because Glasgow were the biggest local authority by quite a way, and you didn't have them in the national contract. And I think my other observation about Wales would be is that the national contract operates very differently in South Wales to North Wales. There's a significantly greater buy-in in South Wales than there is in North Wales, both by local authorities and IFAs as well. Sorry, Marie.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's very true.
Please carry on.
Okay. Okay, what I've also just drawn some attention to is this slide here shows some work that is emerging and happening at the moment where local authorities have come together, supported by their directors of children's services in the region, to do some specific focused work on commissioning. And I've included the areas where NAFP have some input and where those local authorities have actually come to NAFP and made us aware. So on some of those, we sit on the board, or we sit on a project group for this. You have up in the north west, we have the 4 local authorities of Cumbria, Lancashire, Blackpool and Blackburn and Darwen. They received some seed funding project money. And again, we don't know if this will or won't result in a procurement exercise, but they're looking, they've done some really good work on mapping their needs analysis and the sector in their area to look what's needed for those local authorities. We have the Greater Manchester local authorities that have recently launched the Greater Manchester Sufficiency Observatory, which actually I have to say is a really helpful website, which gives information on the overarching sufficiency plan for those local authorities, and it gives you access to the individual local authority sufficiency plans, and it's very rich in data and incredibly helpful, incredibly useful for providers. Down in the south, we have the London area. So because London, as I showed you before, was so fragmented, the directors of London's children's services have come together to develop what they've referred to as the London Placements Panel. And they are starting to look now at actually what can be done to make the arrangements in London a bit clearer. One of the ideas is looking at a placement platform which all local authorities in London can access. But I think then that might also involve, rather than having to add, the concern would be about adding another layer. It would be about, are there some things in the area that need to be decommissioned or to be sort of faded out? So there is some work happening in London, which we are linked into. In the southeast, CESLIP, the Southeast Service Sector Improvement Partnership, I think it is, they have 19 local authorities that are working together. At the moment, it's focusing predominantly on children with complex needs, quite a focus on residential, but they are including fostering services in there as well. Harvey sits on the board. Am I right in that one, Harvey? I've just said that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was focused
Yeah.
on residential largely to start off with. Well, actually, in theory, it was focused on complex adolescence, which inevitably meant it was probably more about children's homes and foster care. But it is genuinely looking to incorporate both in the plans moving forward.
Yeah. So, and then we have, this has just been launched. It's the 15 local authorities in the Southwest, and the Southwest Directors of Children's Services have approved funding for a Southwest sufficiency project. As I said, very early days, and what those local authorities are doing are starting to map out need, provision in their area, and look at what they need to do to increase sufficiency in the Southwest. And then the last slide that I've got here is what we understand the potential and likely and possible procurement exercises that are going to be taking place this year. So a lot of these are where contracts have frameworks are either ending towards the end of this year, or they'll be ending in March, April 2022. So these local authorities will be either looking to extend, but from my knowledge, I don't think many of these local authorities can extend anymore. So I think that most of these, if not all of these, will be doing a procurement arrangement of sorts. Yeah, so as you can see, there's quite, and there is it's the pressure really on the south for IFPs in the south is particularly difficult, because we have got a number of IFPs that will sort of be members of all these frameworks, and if we have tendering that happens at the same time, we are obviously going to have, particularly it's very, very difficult for our smaller and medium providers, who may, out of sheer problems with capacity, may have to pick and choose which local authorities they decide to engage with, and that will become down to surely the timing. And so we're sort of doing some work with the Southwest Peninsula, South Central at the moment, to try and get some sort of timeline, or getting them to work together so that they can stagger their tendering exercises. London I've put in pink because it's got a bit of a question mark there. London, we don't know whether or not there will or won't be a procurement exercise this year. It will depend very much on what's coming out of the earlier project that I referred to. And at the end there, I've just got my email address. If anyone doesn't have that, on my phone number is, so if you did want to email me afterwards, or give me a ring to have any discussions about anything that you may have seen in there which may have been potentially inaccurate. So as I said earlier, I can then look at where that information came from, and we can try and sort of make sure the source of the information is clear. So I think that's it, Harvey. If there are any questions in the box?